again, thanks everyone for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us for leader training this year and to kick off our semester. We imagine there's going to be a lot of questions, a lot of things coming up, so please bear with us as we present to you all today, and there'll be plenty of time to check in with people as time allows. With all that positive, go ahead, Brandy.
I'm so sorry. I think I need to record to my computer, not to the cloud, right? Sorry, y'all.
Yeah, that works fine. That will be fine. Yeah.
The cloud's okay.
The cloud is fine, and your computer's fine. Either way, we can retrieve it.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandy. And thank you all again. So I know we're pretty high energy. I'm pretty high energy this morning. I'm on my second cup of coffee, so I'm a little jittery, but we did want to set the tone today. And it would be strange if we didn't acknowledge our current situation that we're in. And so we wanted to take a moment to acknowledge our current moment. So we wanted to take a second today before we begin to invite you all into the space as you are, fully human and very much in our current context. We want to acknowledge that the last few months have produced many considerable challenges, anxieties, loss, discomfort, maybe even pain. And in the midst of our global pandemic, and at a time of great societal unrest that calls for systemic and personal change, we realize that we are in trying times. And as such, we want to welcome you here to our session as whole people who are carrying the weight of our current moment in a variety of ways. So while we're so excited, and we're really so excited to welcome you back, and we hope that you'll engage with us for the next hour and a half or so, we also want to hold that many of you are coming to our session today from vastly different headspaces. And all of those headspaces are welcome. So we just want to set the tone that way before we get started so that y'all know we recognize that, and we see you, and we appreciate you for being here today. With that said, oh, and I'm sorry, Phoebe, I think the slide is actually backwards still. So you're going to be leading us in a land acknowledgement. So I'll move us to the next slide and you can get started.
Hi, everybody. So as Anthony said, I'm going to lead a land acknowledgement. In the spirit of the Jesuit practice of composition of place, we acknowledge that Gonzaga University resides on the homelands of the Spokane tribal people. This land holds the cultural DNA and spirit of the first people of this place, the people of the river. It is their ancestors who are here and bring forth the power of this place, the knowledge that comes from the land. We are grateful to be on this land and ask for its support as we work to manifest our intentions during this gathering of hearts, minds, and spirits. Even as we acknowledge this land, we recognize that this acknowledgement is merely a first step towards decolonizing our relationship with this place and the people who have historically called it home. We also recognize that some of you may be geographically in other places, and we invite you to learn about and engage with the history of the land on which you are currently located.
Thank you, Phoebe. We wanted to start today's session off with a little pre-flexion. And so just a little bit of baselining for us all today. We're coming back from a summer, a very interesting summer, from a academic year that was also very interesting. And so wanting to kind of reset. So if you would all join us by going to www.menti.com and typing in the following code. We're going to ask you to reflect on a pretty simple question in a moment. Actually, maybe pretty complicated as well, just to get a sense for where people are at today. We'll give people a moment to get there.
Anthony, can you go back to the code?
Oh, absolutely. So it is 7606 152. Thank you, Kathy. It's also at the top of this page right here. If you see at the very, very top, you see the code there. And so the prompt we're reflecting on today is when you hear the phrase social change, what words come to mind? And we'll take about 30 seconds more. If you could take 3 more seconds to wrap up. Okay. Thank you all so much. So we're going to do this again at the end of the session, and I'd like to see how things kind of shift throughout our session today. But some of the words that are coming out are justice, community, necessary, equity, progress, important, right? And so we see some common themes already emerging in your understanding of social change. But today's session, we're going to be focusing on this idea of social change, right? And so we'll take you through a little bit of a refresher of the CCE orientation that we did in the spring, just to refresh you on our mission and vision, our principles and practices. And then we're going to jump into our critical service learning, critical community engagement, focused on social change. So that's what our session today is about. And we'll get started there. So thanks, y'all. And this will be available to you all afterwards as well. Wonderful. There we go. Okay, so last semester, before y'all left, we touched base as leaders, virtually actually, about our mission and vision and a little bit about critical service learning. So we just wanted to provide a quick refresher for y'all as you get back into this year, to get back into this headspace. And so for our mission statement, it reads, by connecting Gonzaga University with local, regional, and global partners, the Center for Community Engagement positively transforms our students and our communities. Honoring the Jesuit Commission commitment to social justice and solidarity, the CCE partners with staff, faculty, and the community to develop relationships grounded in reciprocity that strive to meet the needs of the community and promote social change. The CCE provides experiences that allow students to hone their intellectual, physical, spiritual, and emotional gifts in service of the common good. Through these experiences, students will grow in their understanding of complex societal issues, will have the desire and ability to challenge oppression in their own communities, and will seek solidarity with those impacted by injustice. Our vision statement reads that we believe every person has infinite worth, that together we can create a more just and equitable world. These mission and vision statements connect directly to our university's mission of educating students for lives of leadership and service for the common good. And while these are all really beautiful words to read on a page or on our website, you all, as our student leaders, are the ones that help us create opportunities for our students to live out this mission. It's part of our Jesuit ethos of people for and with others. So we want to center our work today in our mission and vision, reminding you all of your place in this work. You're integral to this work. And so just a quick reminder of who we say we are. And then Phoebe's going to jump us off with some principles and practices.
Thanks, Anthony. And then if we can advance the slide, thank you. So if CCE's mission and vision are our guiding star, our principles and practices are the vessel by which we travel. If the mission and vision are the why, the principles and practices are the how. So I know you all reviewed these in the spring at our leader training, but I wanted to invite you now to take a few minutes just to read them over and reconnect with them. As you're reading, reflect on which one of the principles and practices resonates with you the most, and also reflect on which one you struggle with, but that you will commit to intentionally practicing this year. We're going to give you about 2 minutes to read and reflect. At the end of that time, we're going to put you in pairs in the breakout rooms to share your thoughts. So go ahead and take about 2 minutes, and I'll let you know in 2 minutes that you're going to be heading into the breakout rooms.
Next year, Phoebe, we need to think about some nice reflection music to play during this time. So
Yes,
we'll be on it. We'll be on it.
Okay, it's been about 2 minutes. Brandy, would you go ahead and put people into the breakout rooms?
Yeah, so there might be 3 folks in a few of the rooms.
Okay, and we'll give you about 5 minutes in breakout rooms and before we bring you back.
Cool. Here we go.
Are we live again?
Please mute if you haven't muted yourselves. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Brandy. Phoebe, are you back in the main room with us?
I am.
Okay, did you want to say anything else before we move on?
No, I think we are ready to move on.
Awesome. So yeah, in the interest of time, thank you all for reflecting there. We're gonna start getting into the social change component of our presentation. Yeah, thank y'all. I was in a really great little room there with Dawson and got to reflect a little bit about principles and practice. Gosh, it's like been so long since I've talked to students, so it feels really good. But we'll move on with our presentation. So wonderful. So we realized that we presented on this critical service learning model in the spring. I'm not sure if everyone here was at that session, if you got a chance to view that recording, but we wanted to take some time today just to go over, do an overview of critical service learning, really brief, because I love Tania Mitchell. She's the author of this work. I love this model. I think it's really important for us to do this work with this model in mind, this context in mind. So I want to keep reiterating this model, and I also don't want to there's better terms for this, but I don't want to beat a dead horse, right? I don't want to keep, coming back to the same. So hopefully we'll do this as a little refresher, and it will let us get into some other cool tools we can use to help our student leaders, to help our volunteers get to this idea of social change. Right? And so we start with this critical service learning model. And to understand the critical service learning model or the critical community engagement model, first we have to look at the traditional way of doing things. And so in a really great piece that Tania Mitchell wrote in 2008, she outlines the differences between traditional ways of community engagement, traditional ways of service learning, which is what you all are leading, right? In your programs, you're leaders for programs that are asking our students to engage in the community and hopefully learn something in that process, right? And so there's traditional ways of doing this, and there's this really cool, critical way of thinking about it that I want to reiterate today. So our traditional way of service learning, the model is here up on the screen. Can everyone see that? Great. At the center is the student. So our volunteers or our leaders, but in this case, because y'all are leaders, we'll think about that center as the student volunteer. So students, they go and they learn how to serve, right? Through orientations, through one-on-one time with you all, through trainings that we do. And then they serve to learn. So they go out into the community, participate in service, and make meaning of those experiences through reflection, right? They go out to the community and they experience things with the people that they're working with. They reflect on that, come back to you all as student leaders. The classroom component doesn't really matter here. They come back to Gonzaga and they reflect on those experiences. They make meaning of them. They learn new techniques, strategies to engage better the next day. They go back out into the community and the cycle continues. The critique of this model is that it's really student-centered. And so it's really focused on like the volunteer experience. And that's important, but it's not everything in this work. Can't be everything in this work, right? And so this model is student-centered. It often doesn't explicitly acknowledge power differences, right? So when students are going out into the community, there's an inherent power difference there. Often our students are coming from their privileged context here at Gonzaga as a student who is here to learn, right? And that privilege is always complicated, and going into communities that may or may not share that same privilege. And so power differences in this model are typically ignored or swept under the rug or just not really engaged with. The third component is that there really is an acknowledgement that there needs to be deep relationships, but it doesn't always say how to do that, right? And sometimes this model, the fun and happy relationship that you have is like the end goal. And that's not really deep critical engagement. So without the exercise, and so this is a quote from Tania Mitchell, right? She says, there are examples where community service learning, community engagement is criticized. It's labeled as charity or forced volunteerism, and critiqued for reinforcing established patriarchies and deemed paternalistic. So these are some of the critiques of how it could be done. And without the exercise of care and consciousness, without drawing attention to root causes of social problems, without involving students in actions and initiatives that address those root causes, our service experiences, our programs may have no impact beyond students' good feelings, right? So we don't want our programs just to be a feel-good experience. Ideally, this will happen at service, right? But that's not the point of our programs. There's a deeper learning, a deeper critical engagement, consciousness that we want our students to come to, right? And so service experiences that don't pay attention to these issues may involve students in the community in a way that perpetuates inequality and reinforces this us and them dynamic, right? We can run the risk of doing more harm than good, okay? These kinds of models may serve to mobilize our students, our privileged students to participate and embrace systems of privilege and preserve already unjust structures, which is not our goal, right? But if we're stopping here, that's what we might be doing. So critical service learning, and I've been thinking about this a lot, how we use our language. We could also think about this as critical community engagement, right? Critical community engagement offers us a way forward. So critical community engagement has to emphasize the skills, the knowledge, and the experiences required of students to not only participate in our communities, but to help transform them as engaged and active citizens. So social change is going to be at the heart of this model. And critical service learning must focus on creating true community and university partnerships, true partnerships between our students and our community members, where community issues and concerns are as important as their development, right? So in the first model, you see the students at the center. Here, what you're really seeing is our community at the center, right? Our community partners, the community that we're working with. The three tenets there are social change orientation, working to redistribute power, and developing authentic relationships. So these three tenets at the core are talking about our relationship to our community. So you see how that's flipped it there? Instead of it being completely about our students' experience, we are shifting the narrative. We're putting community in the center. And so today we're going to be talking a little bit more about going deeper on social change orientation more specifically, right? So Abby will be talking about authentic relationships later. I believe there's a presentation on power later. Today's session is about that blue, the blue first tenet there, social change orientation, okay? Wonderful, so Tania Mitchell writes, while individual change and student development are desired outcomes of our learning models, critical service learning balances our student outcomes with an emphasis on social change, right? So it's not enough to have a really great experience for our volunteers. We need to orient our programs in ways that move us toward social change. So, wonderful. So student development, our volunteers development, and community change can often be seen as mutually exclusive. They're not in the same realm. And traditional ways of doing service learning tend to emphasize our students, focusing on their experience, their pre-professional experiences, their social development, their development. But we really need to think about our programs in ways that orient students toward a social change orientation. So for you as leaders, how do you develop a social change orientation? This social change orientation requires us to rethink the types of service activities in which our students are engaged, as well as organizing our programs, our projects, in ways that challenge students to investigate and understand root causes of social problems. If everyone can mute, please, thank you. Social problems, and the courses of action that are necessary to challenge and change structures, okay? So we're really thinking as leaders, how are we getting our volunteers into a space where they're practicing being agents of social change, being members of a community that have social change in mind, okay? So student leaders who want to move toward critical service learning have to find ways to organize community projects, their programs, and their work alongside your program managers, right, and with the professional staff, to allow our volunteers to critically analyze their work in the community. And we have to support our volunteers in understanding the consequences of service alongside the possibilities, okay? The ways that service can make a difference in the world, as well as the ways it can perpetuate systems of inequality and be done really poorly. And so one way we can start to do that is by asking these big questions, right? A social change orientation requires us to rethink the types of service activities that we're engaged in and investigate root causes. How do we start to investigate root causes? One way is to make sure that when we're thinking about our programs, we have the big questions in mind, right? So these are some examples, just to get our mind going. Why do we have significant economic gaps between different racial groups? Why do women continue to face economic and social inequities in our society? Why does the richest country on earth have such a serious problem with homelessness? Why do people with developmental disabilities continue to be disproportionately excluded from the workplace? Why are environmental concerns, such as the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, allowed to persist in communities of color? Okay. So these big questions are not easily answered, but if we have these in mind when we start to plan our programs and start to think about our year, we can move our students from a place of charity-based work to something that looks more like social justice or solidarity. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? One of the biggest questions we could ask is, why is there a need for this service in the first place? Why is there a need for me as a volunteer, as a student leader, to be here, right? Because we're doing this work. That's a big question. That's like the first question we should be asking ourselves. What conditions have caused, what circumstances have caused our conditions that allow, sorry, I'm so twisted there. What has allowed us to be at this moment right now, and why is there a need for us to be? So that's one of the first questions you so we want to give you some tools to think about this and to get a little deeper on the root causes of your individual programs. And so the programs that you're going to be working with this semester and this year, we want to give you some time to think about those root causes. And so Phoebe is going to lead us in an activity around root causes. So Phoebe, you can take it away. Sorry I ran over there a little bit.
Thanks, Anthony. So as Anthony said, a big part of the work that we need to do to develop a social change orientation is to really dig into the why. The problems that you encounter working in your programs don't happen in a vacuum. And if we're going to do this work well, we need to delve into the factors that contribute to them. So for the next 25 minutes, we're going to do an activity to start digging into the root causes of the problems that you encounter. So first, take a moment right now and think about a particular problem that you've seen while working in your programs. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to think about that.
And for context, Phoebe, we're asking them to think about specifically a social problem that exists in your placement. And so
Yes.
not necessarily like individual problems you had as a volunteer last year, as a leader last year, but some of those bigger issues that may be affecting the students that you're working with, the community that you're working with.
Thanks, Anthony. Okay. So now take a minute to get a piece of paper and a pen. Make sure you've got what you need. I'm going to ask you to draw the diagram that you see on your screen. Once you've got that, go ahead and write that problem that you identified where it says social problem. We'll give about 2 minutes to get your pen and paper and draw the diagram. Okay, about 30 more seconds to draw the diagram. Okay, now we're going to give you about 7 minutes to work independently on these. Start to think about the whys for the problem that you identified. What are the root causes? As an example, looking at the problem of homelessness, there are a vast number of root causes that affect this issue. Lack of a living wage, educational inequity, incarceration, mental illness, those are just a few that could contribute. So take the root causes that you identify for your problem and fill them in by the roots. Then think about some potential actions and fill those out at the upper right. I'm acknowledging this worksheet is not perfect. It says potential actions and solutions. Most of these problems are not going to be something you can solve. So just framing it more in terms of actions. And then think about who else you should bring to the table when trying to address this problem, and use the space for community assets and fill those in. As you work through this, pay attention to what you know, but also pay attention to what you don't know. Where are the gaps in your knowledge? Think about those spaces where you need to do more work to engage with the community in a respectful way, and where you need to gain that knowledge. As an additional piece to the exercise, write down the questions that are important to ask as you look at ways to gain knowledge and address the problem. So again, we're going to give you about 7 minutes now to fill these out. At the end of that time, we are going to put you into breakout groups. We'll bring you back and then we'll put you into breakout groups with a couple of reflection questions. So during this 7 minutes, feel free to turn off your camera if you want to work by yourself without people watching. And I will give you about a 2-minute warning when it's time to come back.
I'm going to pause the recording for now too.
Now, if there was anything from your group conversation that you found to be particularly impactful, were there any aha moments that you had while connecting with some of your colleague leaders? Is there anything that really hit home for you? This is an optional sharing if anybody wants to unmute and jump in and share something that they are taking away from that conversation.
I'll start us off. I'm Abby. I work in youth programs, and really good to see all of your faces. I was just going to share that in my conversation with Phoebe and Brandy, we were our own little breakout room, and we were talking about how some of the it was really hard to identify root causes because it presumed that I knew a different individual's circumstances, which I don't know, felt prescriptive. And then additionally, a lot of the root causes so the social problem I identified was youth needing a positive adult in their life. And that can take many shapes and forms. And some of those root causes that I identified as perhaps preventing that was like overburdened schools or familial economic stress. And then a lot of the potential solutions or community assets to leverage, I identified as those same things. So I wonder if that came up for anyone else.
Thanks, Abby. Does anybody else have anything they want to share that they're taking away?
I think Abby got at this really well, but it was really interesting seeing that we all had a different problem that we were focusing on for our graph, but a lot of us had very similar root causes, or we could see how another root cause could also be working towards our problem, or how our problem could even be a root cause for something else, and just really how intertwined it all is. I thought was really interesting to see.
Thanks, Sam.
We had a very similar. Oh, go ahead, Ben. You were in my group.
Oh, dang. Okay. I was just gonna say, like, we've jumping off that, like, we had a similar experience where we've all found common root causes, and the problem that we found is that those root causes kind of made a cycle with each other. Like, we talked about economic and educational inequality, and like both of those inequalities become more pronounced with, like, through their relationship with each other. Do you have anything to add on, Lindsay? My bad.
Thank you. We have time for maybe one more person to share, and then Anthony, will you wrap up?
I will, yeah. And Andrea, I'll ask Andrea how much time we have in a second, but go ahead.
So if anybody has anything to share.
Just to kind of piggyback off of what Ben was saying, educational inequality or access to higher education was a pretty significant root cause in all of the issues that we addressed, most specifically with homelessness or drug and domestic abuse, as well as some conversations surrounding GUSR or opportunities for people with developmental disabilities as well.
Thank you for sharing. Okay, Anthony, over to you.
Thank you, Phoebe. Real quick from Andrea, how much time can I spend?
My presentation's about 20 minutes. Brandy, what does that equate to?
Got 2 minutes, Anthony.
Great. So we were ambitious with this presentation. We're not going to be able to do this full justice. Real quick on the tool that we just used. It is a start. It's not the end goal, right? So nothing that we do and nothing that we present is going to get us to like a decision or a solution. This is a social analysis tool that is pretty simple and can maybe help your volunteers in getting to that deeper level thinking, right? It helps us to identify the social problems, the social issues, the challenges that our communities face, that we may face ourselves. It helps us to think about and get in the habit of thinking about root causes. And that habit's good. Whether or not you know what the root causes are, the questions lead us to deeper understandings. And the curiosity that we have in doing that every time we enter into a service experience helps us to find the resources, find the knowledge from our communities, from our colleagues, from our peers that can get us to better understanding of those root causes. Finally, the potential actions and solutions. None of us should ever fill this form out and have a potential solution and think that that is the solution, right? We know better. We all know better. And you all as leaders definitely know better. We know you do. But when we come to those, when we start thinking about solutions and actions we could take, it helps us be creative and test those out in conversation with our community partners, with our community members, with other folks and other constituents that are part of that, right? But getting in the habit of doing this kind of cycle of thinking is helpful for us to get to a social change orientation. I have a few analogies. I'm not going to be able to do justice, but there's this really wonderful, it's wonderful and complicated analogy of upriver, downriver, or upstream, 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 downstream. And so I'll read this really, really quick. There's a quick story. Some folks were fishing on a riverbank and they saw a person struggling in the current. They entered the water and they pulled the person out. Soon they saw another person struggling. and they pulled that person out of the water as well. And this continued all afternoon. The folks who had gathered originally realized that the problem was too large for the small group. So they went into town and got more folks to come assist. They realized that people who had been floating down the river needed medical attention. And eventually they needed a place to stay, clean clothes, food and water. More and more people came to meet these needs. Many of the people who had floated down the river also became a part of the efforts to get more people out of the river. This went on for quite some time. Finally, some of the folks, exhausted and confused about why this problem persisted, decided to go upstream to find out why and where so many people were falling into the river. They discovered a beautiful overlook along the river's edge without any warning signs or protective barriers. They returned downstream, went to their community and reported the number of people who had been pulled from the river and explained the connection between those people and the unprotected overlook. The community agreed to install a protective guard and post warning signs, which helped prevent the problem from happening in the first place. This is a super simple analogy that I really want to complicate because there's a lot of ways to complicate it. But essentially, this helps us understand the work that we do through direct service and the work that we are asked to think about doing upstream through advocacy and policy change, systems level thinking about the work that we do. So clearly there's a need at the bottom of the river that needs to be met. Many of us and our students, our community members are part of those efforts. That's wonderful. And there's also a reason that these things are happening. This analogy is super simple. It says that there's one root cause, there's one upstream issue. We know that's not the case. 2, it presumes that the people in the river couldn't save themselves, couldn't get to the riverbanks by themselves, didn't have ways of navigating the river else in other ways, right? That's also true of our communities. It's not entirely asset-based. These are all the critiques of this prompt, but it is helpful in illuminating where we are in the work and what we're asking of our programs to do the downriver work of direct engagement, working with our volunteers. Sometimes that looks like charitable work. Sometimes that might look like traditional service learning, and to do the upriver work of advocating alongside our community partners. I know we're at time, I'm very sorry. We're not gonna do the last piece, but we will bring you back to Mentimeter. Do we have time for that, Brandy, or no?
Is there any way we could do it without, while also transitioning to?
Yeah, you know what? Let's do it at the end of Andrea's thing, at the end of Andrea's presentation, and we'll come back to it, okay? Yeah. But thanks y'all so much. There's more to this presentation, but we hope that you have a slightly deeper understanding of the social change component of our critical service learning model. Thanks.
Thanks, Anthony. Andrea, let me know if you need any support pulling things up.
Okay, I just need Anthony. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Okay, hi, let's just get right into it. I'm Andrea, and this is going to be a presentation on combating white saviorism in volunteering, something that we think is super important. Oh, why is it not letting me go? There we go. First, we'd like to acknowledge the unique positionality of CCE at our institution and as a whole. While we have people of color that work at CCE, we acknowledge that we are a predominantly white and female staff, which makes it extra important that we recognize our position, work to combat white saviorism, as it's super common, specifically with white women, but white people in general. And also that we work really hard to commit to being as anti-racist as possible. As an organization, we are growing in that mindset, as well as working to do the work personally and as a whole organization. I want to give credit to Adelaide and Portia because a lot of this information I gained from their training they created on white saviorism explicitly in mentoring. and I'm hoping that maybe over Zoom we can get them to come and give their presentation at another time. So first, let's talk about what white saviorism is. White saviorism is a white person acting to help a person of color with a self-serving motive to appear courageous, perhaps morally superior, and also signaling to other white people, look, I'm helping. And as well as saying what other communities need instead of listening to what other communities need. And I'd like to remind us to try to keep an open mind. There may be things you hear that conflict something you've believed in the past. And also when we start watching these videos that I'm about to click, it might come into your heart that you want to tone police, but really think about where that narrative's coming from and actively work to not do that. Hopefully you can hear the video. If you can't, let me know in the chat. It's loading.
Why can't I just be born rich? I want to go to an African orphanage so bad. So bad for what? Going to South Africa for 10 weeks on April to do volunteer/conservation work to help fix my mental health. This is weird. This is weird.
What do you think a white savior is?
Look how great I am. Here I am in Africa doing a great job.
It's almost like they want to come to the rescue of the black man, but it's disingenuous because they're only doing it because they want the recognition.
And it's like, no one asked you to do that. You can go anywhere else and do it the same.
In a movie where, like, you know, the cast is black, right? And then the person who helps the black getaways get away is the one white guy, and he turns up in the movie for like 4 minutes, but his name is the first one that comes up at the start.
Oh my God, white man, you saved me from that situation. Between forest fires, plastic-filled oceans, lonely polar bears stranded on melting ice floes, global viruses, deadly air pollution, famine, and not getting a text back, I am riddled with anxiety. Who will save us from this hot burning pile of garbage we call Earth? Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's White Savior. Sorry guys, hate to be the party pooper, but that's not how it works. I do get it. Hidden Figures, Avatar, Django Unchained, The Help. If white people are constantly being told they're the main character, why wouldn't they want to center themselves in every narrative? But sometimes you just have to step away from the limelight. Sorry, it's not about you. White saviors aren't going to save us. In fact, white savior complex is a symptom of white supremacy. It's what was used to justify slavery, colonialism, and empire. Europeans didn't spend centuries pillaging the entire world for power and wealth. No. It was about rescuing billions of poor black and brown people from a living hell of heathen savagery by bringing them God, Queen, and cricket. The white savior complex is, well, it's complex because so often it's about privileged people trying to make themselves feel better and hopefully getting a few more followers on Instagram while they're at it about the very real problems that they created. And before you jump in to tell me, that wasn't me and that was hundreds of years ago, today's privileged white Westerners are still the beneficiary of all of the awful things that make life intolerable for everyone else, whether they were dying 300 years ago or last Tuesday. Every time. The white savior industrial complex is real, and it really isn't working. And it's black and brown people who will suffer first and worst from the environmental impacts of climate change. So there you have it. I'm not telling you to stop saving the world, but remember that God did not make you guardians of the planet. So if you do insist on being a savior, a little less colonial clout and a little more conscious consumption, and then we might have a chance.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack, and there is a second video that I had, but for the sake of time, I think we will try to email that out to you so that you can watch it in your own time. It really echoes what she was talking about. With the importance of what white saviorism is and moving away from it. So next, we have some of the harmful effects of white saviorism. So first and foremost, When you come in to your volunteer site with a perspective of white saviorism or white saviorism values, this perpetuates an assumption that there is a cultural identity that is right or superior from all other groups, and that people must conform to that, which can be really damaging to people's relationship with their own cultural or racial identity. And we want to make sure that we are an open and affirming place that is not telling people that there's only one right way to succeed or one path to do that, or that they need to be following what society's white norms are. Next, this pushes assimilation instead of affirming into cultural identity. Instead of being open and affirming that all different people come from different backgrounds and that's what is a strength, it takes away from that. Next, white saviorism has a tendency to monopolize the accomplishments of people of color and overcredit themselves in volunteering. So like if a community is succeeding and you got to be a small part of that story, that is not our accomplishment or your accomplishment. That is the accomplishment of the person that achieved it. They are the main character. We are just a supporting side character. It also leads to assuming things about a community that you're serving in, assuming that you know by a house that you can understand what someone's going through or where someone is, what they've been through or are struggling with. I think Abby kind of touched on that earlier, just like assuming what you know about a community or why they're struggling with something. And then there's also so many more effects of this. And hopefully if we can get those two women to come and give the training, we can go even deeper into that. Next, we have what moving away from the white saviorism narrative can look like and should look like. And first, it's letting go of the toxic narrative of being a helper or a fixer. I think that a lot of people have the identity of being a helper, and that can be a good thing, but in this context, it is not, because people don't just need our help and people do not need fixing. They may need access to resources that you've had better access to or knowledge that you've gained, but they don't need to be fixed as a human. Next, we have shifting. This means shifting our mindset from charity to accompaniment. And that really means not looking at what you're doing as a service for others, but looking as the opportunity to walk alongside with someone and be there with them. Next, we have learning. I think Anthony and Phoebe talked about this, learning about the systems of oppression and racism. And as we were talking about root causes that cause some groups to need extra access to support and resources. The next is decentralizing. This is essential. We have to decentralize ourselves from the accomplishments of others and over prioritizing what we're doing for them. We get the opportunity to be in community, and I think that's amazing. And these communities are letting us join them. So we want to make sure that we are showing that we are grateful to be a part of the community. Next is building. You're going to hear more about building relationships from Abby and Joe later. But shifting our focus from helping or fixing into building authentic and meaningful relationships with the people that we're working with. And now we're gonna watch a video on how to be a good ally. Allyship is super important when moving away from the white savior narrative.
Lean on me when you're not strong. Hey, it's Asante, and today we're talking about allyship. A big thing to remember is that allyship isn't passive. If there's a war, your allies don't just sit there like, oh my gosh, genocide? Oh, that sucks, man. Oh, I can't. It's so hard. I don't get it. People can be so awful. I'm totally on your side. The times we live in, it's just so hard. No, they lend their troops, they lend their ships, they send supplies, they send medics, they will go in and fight for you. Allyship is not neutrality. Allyship is not, I believe in you. Good luck. Allyship is an active process that you're always working on. So here are a few steps you can take to be a better ally. First, listen and educate yourself. When people in marginalized groups tell you about harassment or hardships that they're facing because of that marginalization, believe them wholeheartedly. If you feel ignorant in some areas, feel free to ask questions, but maybe ask them to Google first. Trust me, I've asked Google some pretty weird things. It's never offended, and it always has some sort of answer. It's not anyone's responsibility to be your personal tutor on social issues, especially if you're not paying them personal tutor money. There are plenty of resources that are already out there, people who have shared their perspectives in books, articles, YouTube videos. Find the resources that have already been laid out for you. Find the people who are already talking about this stuff online. And as an ally, you should be constantly learning. There's not the Black experience or the queer experience or the experience of being a disabled person. There are so many different ways of walking through the world, being perceived by others, and living at the intersection of various identities and abilities. So even if you think you've heard everything, listen. The second thing that you can do to be a good ally is to uplift marginalized voices. Retweet them, mention them to your friends, highlight them, spotlight them, feature them, hire them, and hire them into positions of authority where they feel empowered to voice their concerns and act on them. Consult with people of color and trans people and neurodiverse people, and then pay them for their time because consulting is a job. Wherever you can, bring diverse people into the conversation. A third thing you can do as an ally is speak up. When you see injustice, when you hear someone being bigoted, call them on their BS. Yeah, it may make you uncomfortable having to point out that someone's being racist, but imagine how uncomfortable Black and brown people feel having to live with that crap every day. It can even be easier to call something out if it's not being directed at you and challenging your very existence. As an ally, you can take that burden off of someone who is already hurting. And if you remain neutral in that sort of situation, you're not an ally. You're not helping. Some people also worry about it being not their place to, for example, speak of issues of race if they're white. But speaking up about injustice isn't the same as speaking for a marginalized group. It is everyone's place to call out problematic behavior, especially since as an ally, you're in a position of privilege and have less fear of retaliation. White people who are slightly racist are more likely to listen to other white people. So as a white ally, it's on you to get your people. Go get your mans. Whose mans is this? Your relatives are likely to listen to you because they usually care about you at least a little bit, and you kind of can't avoid them. So when you're sitting around the table and your auntie acts like people can't be bisexual, call her on it. That is your role as an ally. Bring a supportive voice to the table at tables where I'm never invited to sit. Reach your communities that I don't have access to. Use your privilege to speak where other people would be silenced. Another thing you can do as an ally is to respect safe spaces. Everyone wants to come home at the end of the day. Sure, I may be up for academic debate of politics and social issues, but there are some times when I don't want to be challenged. I don't want to always have to be playing defense. Sometimes I just want to be around other like-minded people with similar experiences who get it. It's empowering, it's strengthening, it's emotionally enriching to be able to fellowship with people without judgments or pretenses or awkward questions just from being who you are. Don't take issue with people coming together around their identity, especially since if you're in the dominant culture, you probably get to do it all the time without even trying. Respect that there's Pride Month, respect that there's Black History Month, and realize that as an ally, the world is already suited to you in that respect. If you're straight and cis, you've probably never feared being threatened for expressing your gender or felt like you needed to hide your sexuality. If you're white living in a dominantly white country, you've probably always seen people who share your heritage in the history books. If you're able-bodied and neurotypical, you've probably never been stopped from entering a common space because it's inaccessible, or had to retreat from a common space because it's overwhelming. Respect the spaces and times of year where people who are usually sidelined get to take center stage. If you're an ally, you'll be fine with the fact that this is not about you, and sometimes that means politely excusing yourself from spaces meant specifically for marginalized groups. The fifth thing that you can do as an ally is to get to work. Okay, you gotta do the work. Use your strengths, your access, your resources to help the cause. Protests can be...
Okay, so for the sake of time, we're gonna stop that there, but I'll also send out the link. Please watch the rest of the video. It's so good. She has amazing things to say. I'll sum up really quickly what she's about to say is that protests are a good start, but there are so many other ways to get involved as well, and to make sure that you're looking for different ways to do that. Next, we have your action items. So the things we're hoping that you take away from this. First is that we practice humility. The next is demonstrate an ability to grow if corrected. If someone corrects you on something or says that you offended them, taking that as an ability to grow and move and become better. The next is keep each other accountable when you're at your sites. We're not always with you, someone's not always watching, but if you can hold yourself and others accountable, it can help make white saviorism easier to stop. The next is put community members' mental and physical safety over all else. It is so important, and that's what we'd like to prioritize. And next we have create open and affirming spaces. This means that we are affirming people's racial and cultural identities and not asking anyone to conform. And now we have a quick reflection. You can just do this to yourself. I know we're right at time. Think about what you've learned, where you've grown, how white saviorism values and narrative can affect mentoring or volunteering in your space, and how we can work to stop that. Thank you so much for listening.
Andrea for president.
Thanks, Andrea. Anthony, did you want to bring up your screen again?
Sure. And I also wanted to apologize to Andrea, for going over. I really didn't want to do that. And yeah, you did a wonderful job. Thanks, Andrea. And I'll share this screen real quick. And if y'all on your way out could respond to it, that would be wonderful. Again, if you go to mentee.com and type in the code 7606152 and respond to the prompt on your way out. We really appreciate your time with us. Maybe Brandy and Abby have some next steps, so I'll shut up. But thanks y'all for joining us.
Yeah. We'll see y'all at 1 o'clock. There is a different link to the 1 o'clock meeting, so 1 to 2:30 this afternoon. We know we threw a lot at you, like all at once, got started right at 10 and off to training. We're so excited to see you. Have a good lunch.